Hey gang, it's Al with Longoria House Dog Training. Hope you're having a great day today, and I have some dog training questions that I wanted to go over and answer those. So question number one that I have is, how do I teach my dog not to bark in their crate? This is actually a pretty big problem for a lot of people, and I want to give you some common sense strategies for the way that you can deal with it. Before I go into those strategies, what I want you to think is really consider your dog. If you're not necessarily meeting all of their physical and mental needs on a daily basis and on that regular basis, then it is tough for them to understand some of the things that I'm going to ask you to do next to help them to understand how to be quiet. So just keep that in mind. You want to be playing with your dog and you want to be engaging their minds into some kind of activity on a regular basis if you're just going to ask your high energy or medium energy dog to be quiet. So let me go over two basic principles that go to dealing with any behavior. When it comes to dealing with behaviors and the reduction of any behavior, that is called punishment. It's more like a clinical term than actually like a form of abuse or anything like that. So we're going to look at punishing, the clinical term of too much of excessive barking inside the crate. The two most popular ways to do that is by using a frustration method, and then also using a method that has pressure and can create discomfort. And I want to go over both of those. But both of those can be very effective. The problem with the patience method is that typically people tend not to be patient enough to let this actually manifest and turn into a habit, where the problem with the pressure method is that people tend to put too much pressure on their dogs in order just to get the dog to be quiet. So really finding a balance that's right for you is something that I want to help you find. So in the frustration method of teaching your dog to be quiet in the crate, there's not actually a voice command that you use to generate the dog being quiet. You actually don't introduce the voice command for some time once you actually get started on this. So here it is. Your dog is in the crate and they are barking. If they are barking because they want your attention, the simple answer to punishing this behavior is to ignore your dog. Now, that is actually going to frustrate your dog more initially, but then your dog is going to give up as the frustration effect takes place. So now that your dog has actually been frustrated into being quiet, this is where the training really begins. At that point, you need to randomly but consistently enough come back and reward your dog for being quiet. What will happen to you is if you frustrate your dog, they stop barking, and then you make a reward and then you forget about them, then the barking is automatically going to come back. So what you really want to do is once they're quiet, you want to be rewarding them at regular or actually consistent, but I think here's a better way to say it. You want to reward them intermittently, okay, but often enough that they don't actually go back into the barking. Now, let me give you one thing that you could make a mistake. If your dog just barked and then immediately goes quiet and then you go and reward, your dog will end up manipulating you to bring you them treats because the bark got you to come back, one, giving them attention, and two, giving them food. Now, under the pressure method, there are several ways that you can do this. The easiest tool that I know of is to use a remote collar. So in the remote collar method, when your dog barks, then you would say the word quiet, immediately followed by an uncomfortable level on the remote collar. It shouldn't be particularly high, but it should be enough that the moment that you use about 1 second of your remote collar, that the dog's barking is actually going to go less, okay? And at that moment, then the technique that I described before, where you actually go back and start rewarding your dog for being quiet, is very, very important, because just saying quiet and then punishing the dog with your remote collar in and of itself isn't going to get rid of all the barking. Now, my favorite method when I'm doing this is to actually frustrate and try to reward, but if it just becomes too much of a nuisance as I'm trying to frustrate the dog, then I will introduce random remote collar stimulation to tell the dog that I do need you to be quiet. Now, take all this with a grain of salt. As I'm describing this method to you, it's so important, okay, that you're meeting the physical and the mental needs of your dog on a regular basis if you're going to deploy that technique. All right, well, I hope that's helpful. Take care.